Hi, I'm Pierre. I live in this old yellow house with my wife and 3 kids. In a year, we're moving away from this house to live on a farm 3 hours north from here. Right now, I'm working as a school principal, but I'm quitting my job to renovate the house on the farm, and hopefully we can make a living from growing food and working less for someone else and more for ourselves. But in order to achieve this, we need to do a lot this year. Before selling the house, we need to make sure it's looking good. There are a ton of things we need to repair and lots of things we need to get rid of. And in the meantime, I spend time in the workshop making things that I enjoy. Make sure to subscribe to follow us on this journey. This video is sponsored by PCBWay. More about that later in the video. It was a regular Sunday morning. We were both working on our computers when she said the words I love to hear.
These chairs are so uncomfortable. There must be something better.
Those words sent me down the depths of the internet in the search for the perfect chair. What is the perfect chair, I wondered. I needed to figure out a solution to this problem because when you get an assignment from your spouse, you need to solve it. It's also commonly known as a honey-do list. I do agree with her though. Especially when I'm working for longer periods of time, I just want to lie down. And I do. I edit most of my videos lying down, for instance. Maybe it's just me being lazy, but I want to try this thing out. While researching, I remembered a friend of mine that had a weird-looking chair a couple of years ago. I just remembered that he said it was comfortable and good for the posture. And this is it. This is a chair designed by a Norwegian called Peter Opsvik. And the chair is called Varier Balans. It is supposed to provide optimal comfort. Really? I don't see it. But maybe there's a chance that this chair is going to get me off the couch. I still don't believe it, I just want to lie down. I decided to give it a go, and at the end I'll tell you what I think about it after using it. I started by drawing up the shapes in Fusion 360, and then I could head for the workshop. The thing is that it is made from bent plywood, and I would love to try that out someday, but I don't want to spend money on thin plywood right now. Instead, I wanted to try to use the 18mm plywood that I already had and make it using that. I don't know if it will hold, but I figured I could at least try. I mean, if I were to make more of these chairs, it would be worth bending the plywood, but I'm only making the one, so making a bending jig for this would only result in too much labor. Remember, I just want to lie down. The thing is, I only have a half a sheet of plywood, because the other half I used to make the other chair. So I might need to use some other material as well in case I have too little plywood. And plywood in Sweden is really expensive at the moment, but also there's none to get where I live. The plywood is 18mm, so in order to make the legs wider, I'm gluing 2 pieces together, making it 36mm wide. So I need to cut 4 pieces of legs all together. The design consists of 6 pieces, the 2 leg parts, 1 piece for keeping the legs together, and 3 pieces for the cushions. So I did the 2 leg parts on the CNC. But if you don't have a CNC, you could of course have the design printed on paper and trace it onto the wood. I have a 6mm bit in the CNC. The speed is set to 1400mm a minute, which makes this take around 1 hour in total. Once I had my leg pieces, I glued them together. Now while the glue was drying on the legs, I needed to work on the smaller piece that connects the legs. And looking at the model, the piece is curved, and that makes this so much harder. I started by gluing a couple of pieces of plywood together. To start, I needed to create the cove, and I knew you could actually do that with a table saw by making a simple jig. The way it works is basically to run the piece through the blade diagonally. Sounds a bit sketchy, but why not, right? Fortunately for me, I found a calculator online. I'll leave a link down below if you want to try it out. It basically lets you enter all the details, and then you can create a fence on the diagonal crossing the table saw blade, and that will create the cove you want. It might take some trial and error centering the cove, so later I made a new one off camera but using the same technique. You want to be careful with this, but it is a perfect way to create the cove. Now for the outside, I needed to create the rounded edges as well, and the best way I could figure out was just to use a hand plane and go to town. So that's what I did. I'm not a hand tool kind of guy, but I was actually quite pleased with the result. Alright, so I've got my two pieces for the legs. I've got the piece that goes in between the legs. I'm not sure if I need to do one more just at the bottom, like keeping them together. But I'll figure that out later, and I need to shorten this down as well. I drilled all the holes to be able to attach everything together. On the shorter piece I added some threaded inserts off camera. I also rounded over the edges of the legs to give them a smooth edge. And since that looked alright, I went ahead to cut the pieces for the seat and the two pieces for the knees. I used MDF for them as I had some left over, and it is way cheaper than plywood. And that way I actually managed to save a small piece of plywood for another project in the future. I realized I needed to stiffen up the chair some, so I went ahead and made another support piece to go between the legs on the opposite side of the curved one. This one though I made a straight piece, since it's just there to add some extra support and to stiffen up the structure. I attached it the same way with machine screws and threaded insert nuts. That way the entire chair can be taken apart. I wanted to round over the corners of the seat and the knee cushions, so I used a 3D printed round over template. They can be downloaded and printed in all kinds of sizes. And that brings us to today's sponsor, PCBWay. They prototype and manufacture PCBs, but they also offer 3D printing as a service. And the good thing is that you can upload the design to their website and get an instant quote of the price, have them print it and deliver it to you. Go check out PCBWay.com for more information. So in order not to have any more kickbacks, watch my latest video for more information. I drew out the round over to the template, and then I used the bandsaw to remove as much material as possible before routing with a flush trim bit. This will alleviate some of the stress on the bit, and since this is MDF, it should route just fine. It worked a charm, and I had the corners rounded over in no time. Next it was time for the seat and the knee pads to have some foam and fabric. To do this, I simply traced the pieces onto the foam, then I had it cut to size. I then wrapped the fabric and some batting and stapled that to the pieces. But I wasn't too pleased with the result, so I asked my wife for help to make something better, and she helped me with the sewing machine and made the cushions look a lot better than what I did. My initial plan was to paint the chair, but I quite liked the look of bare plywood, so I just gave it a coat of Rubio Monocoat cotton white. And then it was ready to try it out. Yeah, so it's done, and actually, to be honest, I quite enjoy it, but I also still feel a little bit like lying down, but not as much as before. Like, I could spend more time in this one than in just a normal chair, or my chair at work, which is a perfectly good office chair. It seems solid enough. I think it's gonna last for a long time. So that's it. Thanks for following me on this journey making this chair, and I'll see you guys in the next video. Bye.